She programmatically connects her painting to performance, music, and textual production, which, I think in part, we will actively witness in a minute. Her work was the subject of a comprehensive survey exhibition at the Museum Brandhorst in Munich and at the Mudam in Luxembourg 2018 and 2019. Other exhibitions include the Artium Museao, sorry, it's something I constantly say wrong, Victoria Gastheit's Museum Abtei in Mönchengladbach, dann die Contemporary Arts, Modern Museum in Stockholm, Von Abbe Museum in Eindhoven, and the Kunsthalle Bern. Koether has been professor of painting and drawing at the Hamburg University of Fine Arts since 2010. Previously, she taught at the Columbia University, Cooper Union School of Art, and School of Visual Art in New York, Bard College in Annandale-on-Hudson, Yale University in New Haven, Universität der Künste in Berlin, and the Königliche Danske Kunstakademie in Copenhagen, amongst others. Her contribution today has the brief title Detours. Detours are intended or unintended deviations from a set path from A to B. They imply a teleological structure, the assumption of a known destination. Whether something is a detour or not can only be understood by having a concept of a set journey. I think it is fair to say that detours cause frictions in times of economic primate of effectiveness and efficiency. For Koether, detours are transitive practices which subvert the conventions of a lecture. They are gatherings that alternate between painting, reading, and performance. As a format, they have been part of her artistic practice for several years. Here, similar to Hannah Halprin's concept of active witnessing, the traditional opposition of active performers on the one side and a passive audience on the other side is being subverted, and an engagement with the work becomes central. In the process of the upcoming Detour, the exhibition transforms into a stage. This is, of course, very much in the spirit of the exhibition Bühnenbilder and the work of Silke Otto-Knapp. Without further ado, Jutta Koether, the stage is yours, or maybe even ours. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that what? Yeah? Okay, so here we are. This contribution is interestingly tied directly after the previous one and which touched on the pedagogy of Silke Otto-Knapp, and the detour, which was not said in the introduction, has been a practice that I developed also directly in relation to pedagogy or in relation to teaching. So I think this kind of interest, or like let's say the shared ground between my work and Silke's, is that there is no, let's say there is an ongoing negotiation or interest in unfolding perpetually the categories between teaching, talking, researching, practicing, and painting, so that there is a sort of a way to make comprehensive that all of these things somehow need to relate to each other, but in a non-static and like categorized way. Nevertheless, there is a category that I would like to address, or like it has something I have been thinking about a lot in recent times, and I call it what a lot of painter teachers share is what I call the analog drive. Something that you still have a kind of a specific faith in the act of the conversation and the actual physical beings in a space sharing a moment together and trying to find out, to negotiate something together. So this presentation will now continue in the other, in the exhibition itself. If you feel not like sitting on the floor, take your chair and try to not bump into the paintings, and carefully locate yourself over there. Und So hier, ja. Es wird also am besten wäre es, wenn man sich hier in dieser Runde irgendwie drapiert. Try to sort of sit in this round somehow. Ja, ja, irgendwo. Es muss nicht, kein Kreis sein, einfach so. Analog drive. Facts become art through love, which unifies them and lifts them to a higher plane of reality. Facts become art through love, and this all-embracing love is expressed by light. Facts become art through love, and this all-embracing love is expressed by painting. Facts become art through love, and this love is a traveler on analog drive. Strokes on analog drive. And when they ask you where you're from, you say, the world. Facts become art through love, and out of that, on analog drive, love becomes a traveler. So nothing else. While it seems to be good to get what one desires, the greatest good is not to desire what one does not need. Three stars for 3 paintings of Silke's. I would like to make a turn and have a conversation with you about this realm that she called die Versammlung. So take a look. I'll be back. Okay. Likes to start?
Und verteilen zu einem Bild.
Thank you, Leila. There's no sound in this one. It's amazing. See yes. So seeing these here, I had to think about the earlier talk in this symposium about the folding screens, and I felt that they were left somehow not touched so much upon, and I think they somehow, I had to think that they seem to be some sort of transition between this physical space and the illusionistic painterly space. Even though they don't feature illusionistic space, they somehow seem to create this sort of guide into a painterly space. I imagine that I can go behind them and change my clothes and go out as a different character, or go into it as a different character. Maybe I could even become one of the silhouettes.
Yeah, maybe picking up from that. Okay. picking up your thought, I also have to think about how these chains of 3 canvases turned into an architectural element in the space themselves, and how they connect the picture plane and the architecture in a sort of transitional combining way. They stand on their own. They don't need a structure to hold on to, like we've seen in a previous talk about the documentation, about how the wall comes out from the actual wall and becomes and is freestanding, and then the painting is attached to it. But these ones are actually, in a way, self-sufficient and like become actors themselves.
I just wanted to add, now that we are at this topic and looking at the work, I realized that this one has somehow like a very descriptive thing going on that somehow speaks to this transition, with this white figure that seems to close in this sort of black hole and is somehow transformed into like a black, quite similar figure, I would say. It seems to be like a reversal. And I just wanted to add that as a sort of speaking about painting as some sort of entrance or something which you go into and change. That as this painting moves through its own figure, it becomes something different, like sort of negative of the outside.
I was just wondering, when you started to play the music, it felt like they were all dancing. And then when I took the microphone from you, I thought I also have to move around now, because everything was already set in motion. I didn't feel like now talking, so I needed you to start talking in order for me to start talking. And I felt like it was kind of a chain of actions now, where they all vibrate together. We come in here, there are the static paintings. You start to make the music, they vibrate, I move, you talk, and then I talk. Yeah. So who wants to continue?
I'm just observing myself, like a bit mirroring, or us, like sitting in here, watching a group sitting, leaning, listening, maybe also waiting for something else more interesting or whatever to come, or not, like being in the situation or in another. And yeah, that's just super nice to feel with a painting where I don't see faces, but staring closer I can relate to them, and that's just very nice to enjoy.
I was just thinking about the form of, or the format of the star in relation to the canvases, and I was just asking myself if you could position them in a way, or fold them in a way they make a star, like, yes, the big ones, and your star could be like, no, not for real, but like, just imagine how you can create a form or a room of, and the star could be like the tiny version of a room that is created by these stages, something like that.
I think they look very elegant, as if they would, I don't know, celebrate something that they are not celebrating yet. Yeah, but to me, there's a kind of tension between the waiting and the celebration.
I was noticing or watching a lot the distance of the canvas to the floor, and how in the back there's a little space between the floor and the canvas on the right side too, but it seems like it's even a bit lower, and then some are standing on the floor, but they are all painted in a similar way. So how they appear in the space kind of makes them very different, and a small distance creates a totally different experience of looking at a surface somehow. And then of course also the folding of the painting with a little slit that you can actually look through. Yeah, I think it's I'm interested in these little gaps that are created. And then I also noticed that some columns are created additionally, I think, in the space. And that's kind of interesting that, you know, some parts are added and at some parts in the painting, or how the paintings appear in the space, there are these little slits and these little spatial gaps. And yeah, so when I stand here, I just see all these little passages somehow to go through, or to see behind a canvas, to look at a wall. Someone has to take it.
Somehow seeing always the stars now laying there, I really get somehow the urge to take one and like throw it, because of the shape of the star, to make it like a little thing that you can also bring into movement. And then I thought about putting one in between one of the gaps where there's the metal piece, if they could like go through it somehow. Yeah, I don't know, maybe I try. Like this. I don't know.
I was thinking about why Silke has chosen this iconic film by Rainer Werner Fassbinder, Beware of the Holy Whore, Warnung vor einer heiligen Nutte, that was produced, I think, in 1972. And it was produced at the same time when Yvonne Rainer made her first full-length film, Lives of Performers, and a film that was very important to Silke. And both films are about the kind of post-revolutionary desperation of what happens if authority breaks down and the collective group takes over. And both films are about the only possibility either to articulate relationships in terms of love or in terms of jealousy, hate, concurrence, competition. And so for me, it's interesting that she goes to that moment when the group is sitting, you said that in the final scene, not knowing how to continue to produce, because the director already has disappeared. He is a very aggressive director who all the times has very aggressive ways, and also übergriffig, not okay relationships to his actresses and actors. He tries to sleep with everyone, and this of course also fails, and the group is then, this is the moment when the group is thinking about how to continue. What shall we do? How can we, and this is also a reflection on the failing attempt to make a film about racism in Germany, that film that Fassbinder made before, Whitey, and Günther Kaufmann, a black actor, did participate, and Fassbinder fall in love with him, left Ingrid Carven, and the whole group fall apart, and it was shortly before the Fassbinder family would dissolve. And this film is a reflection exactly on this moment. So I just wanted to add this.
Connecting to that, I have to think about like the Scharniere, the aspects of the panels that make it possible for that create a connection. Like we've been talking about gaps and portals, but the Scharniere, they kind of are these impulses that like allow a flow to happen. They are these little gates of connection that allow somehow this togetherness. I had to think of that. Is anyone? I don't want to give it to anyone randomly, but maybe I will. Maybe.
Thank you. I was sitting here staring at those paintings, being afraid of that someone will pass me the microphone, which happened. And I was just again amazed by how elegant, sublime, and present they are, and in their silence, and how helpless I kind of feel looking at them and coming up with any idea of thought, but just thinking, wow, those figures, those paintings, those traces. And also thinking about the hats that they wear and about fashion and about those, how beautiful those staircases look with those single lines creating them. And I feel very little in front of those paintings. Maybe because I'm sitting. Maybe I should, later. But that's also another, I also feel the need to be alone, actually, somehow. And I don't feel that too often, but right now, yeah. Yeah, right now, yeah, somehow. But it's okay that for you, other people being here. Okay. And you want to?
Which is interesting because I think that they are together and they are alone. Each of them, I feel. I mean, I don't feel like they are very much in conversation with each other.
Maybe that's also the moment of when you don't know how to go on, you're not talking. It's just happening. I wondered if there's also a background story to this one, as it's much more folded but somehow doubled.
Yes.
So I think the theme of exhaustion also is partially part in this painting, which is a scene from the Drei Groschen Oper, one of Brecht's plays, and I think you know, his technique of directing theater. Something that's very important to that is the breaking of the fourth wall, and perhaps I would suggest that we go and have a look at the back of the painting. And so sometimes you have to change perspective to understand something in its wholeness. What you see on the front is the moon over Soho, and the moon appears again and again within this exhibition and with throughout Silke's work. I hope, Jan, that I'm not taking away from your lecture, which will be on the role of the moon, but the moon on the front is the moon over Soho. And within the Drei Groschen Oper, there's a moment in which one of the characters says to another, "Look at the moon, it's tired like a worn penny." And at the same time, this painting is so full of life. I think that's it. The contradiction. It's, yeah. The energy all over it is there.
Maybe I can just continue on this, because I just thought about remarking just how rare it is that we get to see the back of a painting in an exhibition. And then I thought, but that's obvious, and I didn't say it because, and then you brought us back here, and now I'm thinking, and yeah, but it's so nice. I mean, it's just, it gives it like a depth that it wouldn't otherwise. Yeah, I mean, of course, it also opens a depth from the front, but now it also opens a depth from the back, in the sense that we imagine how it's produced and how there's a little sticker of Galerie Buchholz and how it's transported, and like just, yeah. So, and I think the way they are presented here, both sides speak equally to us, and it's not a window, it's not a mirror, or not only this, but also just a spatial object, or tracing like scars on what happened to this canvas and this wood and this construction. Yeah.
I mean, that's a good point, but I also think it's not only the fact that we see the back, but also that it is an exhibition where the idea of painting itself, like the object, operates in different ways, all in one space. So it's not like, oh, now we show you the back and then that's the message. But this is just one aspect of how different possibilities are like really like unfolded, and it is, so this is also, on one hand, it opens itself up as this kind of beautiful like triptych to the front, and like what Theo was describing, it invokes certain awe-inspiring moments, and then at the same time it's very vulnerable. It's like a screen. It looks like you could push it and it will fall over. There is no wall to hold it. And then there are other works that are firmly on the wall, but yet their kind of, let's say, fragility is more, indicated through, like the way they're painted, like they're floating, or like they're hanging on the columns or the fake columns. And so there is always this kind of play about stability and fragility, and where painting cannot really find its form. I mean, as the fixed, fully fixed like commodity. You know, that was also, I think, one of the things that she was not, let's say, she was concerned about that, but at the same time she risked that to be part of her work, to not fully do the painting, but always allow the work to operate in different ways in spaces. So I think, and then of course this is very much becomes the stage. The paintings are all about the stage. So this is like a doubling in a way. It's like they consciously wanted to be a show about stages. But even her other work has that within, even the landscapes, or whether like things that you would say, well, they are like paintings, but they carry in a way this performative staging, restaging aspect. You know. So it's nice to see the backs. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about how we as a group just moved here behind the panel, like connected panels, and also a dynamic somehow changed in maybe we are closer together, and a group is also somehow something vulnerable or fragile in that sense, and how yeah. Is that from Ah. It's yeah. Yeah, we are much so on stage.
I think that even though the paintings are stages, they in this architecture become themselves characters, and they're standing and they're kind of moving in some way with the lightness of a human being rather than with the also stability of a stage. And it feels like a body with two arms or something, or articulations.
And who decided the light? How the light is? I think it's a real huge impact of this, also on the image and the face, like the surface of the paintings. And the blue, yeah.
Yes, so the light is there because we wanted this to be a space of artifice. And so the moon reappears throughout the paintings, but the moon for Silke could be an electric light source. It can be a circle, like an abstract geometric form, like it is in Kurt Schwitters. It can be many things, but it is rarely an actual moon. All sorts of other things. Paint on a canvas, but not hearkening towards any kind of naturalism or illusionism of reality, rather affect, construction, the stage, and that's why we have this kind of electric yellow lighting in here, stage lighting, so to say. Also, sure. Yeah.
Just as a follow on what Lena and Jutta said, I was just thinking it's so interesting what happens when someone or something shows its vulnerability, because it totally changed the conversation and also our mood. I think it kind of cheered the group up in my, like we just moved around, and that we now look at the painting from behind, and we're not as, I was talking about being somehow not embarrassed, like, but afraid or intimidated somehow. But now it's like, okay, guys, we're looking at the back of it, and everyone is like, yes, that's fun. But also, like, there is this coming together moment of shared vulnerability that maybe happens through looking at the fingerprints and looking at the, on the flip side of it. Yeah.
I think it's also effect created by the proximity, like in the sense that we move closer to them. Also, with your comment talking about them as some sort of like actors instead of displays. As we've moved closer to them, they become like a person next to us. Some of them, I mean, this is the back, of course, but there's also characters on them that somehow highlight their size relative to a figure. And I think this proximity that the form or shape or movability of the folding screen asks for, that you can somehow see it from far away as the background of a stage or something, or when you get close to it, you somehow intermingle with it, and it becomes the actor next to you, and you become an actor. And this also creates a sense of vulnerability, because people can also be pushed around, and they can be pushed around in a different way. And I also just now noticed that there is 3 of these tags on them. I mean, I don't know how intentional this is, but it somehow also tells that they are individuals, even though they have been grouped together. And I find that quite interesting. The same with the handling, that you can see that they have been handled individually and been somehow assembled afterwards. So,
Speaking about the fragility of the standing pieces, I actually think it is really interesting to get a look from it from behind to see the supporting structure of the painting. Like, you actually see the dimensions, not just from the front, which is mostly the case if you look at a picture when it's hanging on the wall, where the stability comes from the wall and you don't feel like it is as fragile because you could like just bump into it and it will fall. But what that allows us is to see that there is like 2 dimensions to the painting, and there is like a support system from the back that's holding it. And I think that just allows the observer and the viewer like to see the wholeness of it all. Yeah.
What I like the most, I think, from this backside is this slight moment of frustration when you said, that's why you brought us here. I think is really less orotized than the classical way how backsides of paintings are shown. So to call it vulnerability is one possibility, but this even has a slight orotization in it. But just to say, it's just there. So the way how it shows the conditions of production and its own being in the market is just like as it is, And this is what I really like. And maybe also why you said it's easier to speak. And maybe here's the actual Verfremdungseffekt, that backstage is a bit more frustrating than on stage.
It's like the actualization of the stage. Exactly. You're right in it. You're not talking about it. It's like there. That's what I felt.
It's interesting that you just mentioned the backstage. I'm doing research on that space right now, because what I think is interesting about a backstage is it's also less coded than the front stage. Like in the front stage, you kind of know what to do and how to read it, and the backstage is much more free in that way, undefined. No. I wasn't, but I was like thinking of the back of the painting as a backstage. It's also, I mean, it's interesting because I wanted to say it looks different with every backstage, but so does the front stage, right? Like every front stage looks different too. Yeah, but the backstage usually, I was thinking about it more in musical terms, that when you have a band that is backstage, it's a moment of rest. And when you take a pause, then the pause is usually you don't know what to do. You might drink a tea or I don't know. But the backstage of a painting is something different because you know what to do. Like you stretch and you have an action that follows rules. So maybe I have to take my statement back. Because the backstage of a painting is different than the backstage of a venue, for example. it's a maybe social space in contrast to the actual space. But my first reaction was also that I was mesmerized by the beauty of it, like this black on the. I mean, it's so beautiful. The color dripping to its end, and the fingers doing the rest to stretch it, and you have all these traces in a way. That's schön.
I also, I think, I would like to state here that this work was done in the US, and usually when you're a painter in the US, you would never do this. You know, this is like really considered
Sloppy.
really sloppy.
Yeah.
Really, no, I mean, in a way that's
Unprofessional.
unprofessional. Like, it's like the whole thing. Even the thickness of the sketches, they are still insisting in a way in their in a kind of fragility or not in like tank-like
Commodity.
Like, object painting, whatever craft aspect. And so I think there is sort of to the, let's say, the marks and the whatever, like residue of your pen and all these, like it's almost like a signature. It has a life of its own. That's that she also, she was like a professor of painting, and then she's doing this, you know. I think this is, I mean, the way she did not in a way conform to
Yeah, what you can do in the back, I guess.
what you can do in the back.
Yeah, yes. Mm. Mm.
Idea of that there would be a backstage that would be not illusionistic. Therefore, I found it so interesting, Nora, what you said. It is this there-ness in a certain sense that she deals with this tradition and breaks it up to a certain degree.
I think it's interesting that a lot of people have spoken of these paintings as characters, and they in a way serve as a vantage point looking back at the other work within the show. And so the paintings, I mean, pragmatically, that are big enough to do this are actually hung in the show on a height taken from one of the figures on the front, so that the rest of the work in the show is character-like in a way that these, at least takes from some of those elements that these paintings propose that the figures do. So there's a way in which a newer body of work becomes the avenue through which we interpret or deal with the other works in the show here in a quite literal way. I think it's 18 centimeters off the ground, something like that.
Yeah, speaking of the residues, it's also just like, at what point is something dirt or unprofessional or just out of place? And when is it, I mean, this is also paint on a surface, and just the contrast of like looking at the front and seeing how paint is, yeah, well, advocating this idea of painting and looking at a surface and going to the back, and it's the same material, but somehow the conceptions around it, if like raise this question of, is this a painting or is it dirt or is it just like a residue of a process? And I think it's just interesting how she managed to, well, open these layers without staging dirt. But just, and I think this is something that happens actually a lot, in a way that dirt is also romanticized or, well, yeah, staged. And this is like this stage situation where she this doesn't look like it's a staged moment of, look, this is dirt, but rather just something that came up and, well, yeah, as you said, is here and meets us and confronts us. So yeah, and I think it's just impressive that she managed to do that without creating a concept that, or like making it a big thing, but just showing it in a way, and which is not so simple to do. But yeah, opening all these layers just by presenting what is there, I think is very, interesting.
I have two thoughts about the backstage. I feel like in theater productions, the backstage is quite a hectic place. It is where you have a lot of stress and changes, and it is quite contrary to what happens on stage. And I feel like, especially with this painting, the front is like a very still, intimate moment that we look at, and then we have the possibility to look at the back, which is very much also allowing us to be part of her process of painting this very intimate moment, and like letting us into a different stage, which is probably her studio or like where she's producing. And yeah, I feel like this is very interesting. Like the painting itself mimics the theater production because the back is messy and the front is very perfect and staged and intimate. And yeah.
But that's also only possible to explore that space once you decide to like cross this threshold of like moving toward like into the space, but then also moving around. So you kind of also have the choice of exploring a certain entirety of, or like not, yeah, just like a complexity. You can make the decision of exploring that, and in that sense, it is, installed in a way that you have to become an actor yourself somehow.
One other painting before we close. Somebody wants to say something about this? Yeah. No, not from the back. Any, yeah.
Where did you put the first star? Where did you put it? Maybe you want to say something about it.
So this one. Yeah.
The first star painting.
These seem to be seen together, So it's like the way they're hung and the way they're presented. But Lila made this, put the star there. So you want to say something about this painting or not really?
It was intuitively chosen. And I think maybe it was more about the act of walking towards a painting because you were moving and there was still this interaction between us, and I felt like now a walk would be nice. Yes. Yeah. True. I think in that way they are very inviting. They feel very much inviting in the sense that as a looking at them, you identify with the figure, so you feel like you're also moving with them, towards them, away from them. Yeah, ein Tanz, dance.
When I see them from here, I get the feeling that they are presenting a stage, which is happening in between them, like that they are the two sides of the stage. And the wall itself here is the back curtain waiting to become activated somehow. And the movement of the character seems to allude to some sort of possibility of that. Short comment.
I think there's something to be said for ascension in the whole show. We were starting with the triptych, and within those paintings there are 3 parts, and then those 3 parts also form a triptych, and that to me speaks to the architecture of churches and this idea of this 3 and this kind of ascension. And then there's also this otherworldly quality in the paintings, which feels like something metaphysical or of a different planet. And it's nice that towards the back of the show, the end of the show, we have these human figures who are ascending literally with their arms reaching upwards and their legs reaching out. So it's as if they are reaching for this other world.
About what Leila was saying, this effect of when one enters the whole exhibition alone and as one walks through, it really feels like one becomes part of a dance to me. And like the figure, they come out, they become you, they become a painting, the painting stands, then the figures inside the painting appear again. And while one walks, it's like a dance around you, and you suddenly are also part of it. And I think this is very magic effect to make with painting, through paintings and through such a big body of work that are also very different from each other. And suddenly there is a landscape, so there's like a perspective, and then suddenly is empty, and suddenly is filled with someone or with yourself or something.
Thank you so much. I think this really touches also on this aspect that I wanted to really highlight, that there is a sort of intuitive, whatever, like a belief that this type of magic is possible, even if you know it's artifice, you know it's staged, you know you put these ingredients in a way together, and you know it's sort of man-made, and yet there is this aspect of that it through the making you transcend it, in when they all like appear together, you can create a space in which another thing happens. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jutta. I really found it right now so great and touching, the way how you invited us and inspired us to look with so many eyes, and we could see that so many eyes see much more than only 2 eyes. And I just wanted to mention, when I had my conversations with Silke about her work, she again and again mentioned you and the way how you conceive the human figure and how you perform the human figure, that was always very decisive and influential to her.
Thank you. And again, I specifically would like to thank you. This detour concept and also the way this worked today could not have happened without participation of my students and former students who all contributed to this. And I thank you so much. It's really great to see that this continues.